Hey, welcome back to the channel. Daniel here. On this channel, we seek to give reasonable answers to tough questions about God, faith, the Bible. Last video, we talked about the historical Jesus. Is Jesus an historical person or just some made-up story to teach us some lessons? Now, if you're interested in that, go check out the video. But in conclusion, yes, Jesus is an historical person. Now, connected to this, what we want to talk about today is this claim that Jesus is just a copycat of some other mystical religion in that area during that time, that he's just the latest updated version of it. This claim will state that he just falls in line with the many stories of these dying and rising gods like Mithra or Horus or Osiris, and that Jesus' resurrection or Jesus' life is just the latest mystical religious myth. Now, if that's true, then we got to step back like, what do we do with this? And so we want to deal with this objection. We're going to look at two things, all right, when dealing with this objection. First, we want to compare what we know about these mystery pagan religions with Christianity. Are they similar in nature or not? That's important to know. And then we want to zoom in more specifically on what we know about Jesus and compared to these other Horus or Osiris, and are they the same or not? This claim that Jesus is just a copycat was prominent between 1890 and 1940, but it's become popular again through movies such like The Da Vinci Code or Religulous, which was put out in 2008, and others that basically claim that Jesus is just the latest updated version of these dying and rising gods like Horus or Osiris or Attis or Mithra, that Jesus is just the newest version of that. So how do we respond to this? What do we do? So let's first begin by comparing these mystery religions, or what we can know about them, with Christianity. And are they similar in nature? Now, it's important to note that we have very limited information on these mystery religions. There's very little we can actually know about them and what they believe, but we're going to pull out a few things. Joshua McDowell points out three things. They compare three things in mystery religions with three things of Christianity in their book, Evidence, Demand, and Verdict. So I want to draw those out for you guys and see, are they similar? Do they believe the same thing? Do they have the same basis or not? All right, so let's begin with the mystery religions. The first thing is they had secret ceremonies. They had secret ceremonies, meaning everything they did was really kept secret. All right, very cult-like. All right, they had secret beliefs that were known only to the inside group, that were unattainable to those outside the group. Robert Nash, who an author, stated this: each mystery religion made important use of secret ceremonies, often in connection with the initiate rite. The mystery religion, or the mystery rite, tied the initiates together at the same time, separated themselves from outsiders. In other words, what he's saying is that they were secret and not public with what they did and what they believed. All right, they had secret ceremonies. Second is doctrine was not important. Robert Nash goes on to state this, that the mysteries had little, if any, use of doctrine or correct belief. They're primarily concerned about the emotional state of the follower. So they're focused on the experience over doctrine. All right, doctrine was not seen as important. And the third thing is they had a cyclical view of history. History is seen as repetitive, as these dying and rising gods were directly connected to these seasons. All right, N.T. Wright concluded that the death and resurrection of these so-called gods were metaphorical in reflecting the changing of seasons. Now, let's compare that to Christianity. What does Christianity believe in comparison to this? First, Christianity was public and not private. They declared things and were not kept secret. And we'll look at Acts 2, verse 22 to 24. It said, "Men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man attested to you by God with mighty works and wonders and signs that God did through him in your midst, as you yourself know. This Jesus, delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God, you crucified and killed by the hand of lawless men. God raised him up, loosing the pains of death, because it was not possible for him to be held by it." So you see this great declaration, a public declaration of what they believe. All right. Second is doctrine was central. It wasn't a side point. Correct teaching and doctrine is central to Christianity. Emotion and experience are not. All right. It is doctrine and belief. Titus 1:9 says this: "He must hold firm to the trustworthy word as taught, so that he may be able to give instructions in sound doctrine and also rebuke those who contradict it." So doctrine is central to Christianity and not a side point. Third is Christianity is historically based, meaning the foundation and basis of Christianity had nothing to do with seasons, had everything to do with the historical person of Jesus. The historical life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. This has nothing to do with seasons. It's founded in history of the real life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Now, I mention these because it's important to see that Christianity, what they believe, what Christianity believes, and these mystery religions are not similar in nature in any way, but they're completely opposite. Now, with that foundation, let's zoom a little bit more on, is Jesus a copycat of any of these other mystery religions like Horus or Osiris? Gary Habermas, who I mentioned before, who's done a lot of work on historical Jesus, in a lecture on the resurrection states that there are no cases of crucified and risen Savior figures before Jesus, mystical or otherwise. Or he says there's absolutely no cases. Another man by the name of Charles Campbell, who's an apologist, does a lot of work on this type of stuff. He's responding to a movie called Zygest, who came out, I think, in 2007. You could check that. And in this, they state Attis, who is this Roman deity, was crucified, died for 3 days, and then resurrected. Charles Campbell then goes on to say, this is absolutely not true to the mythological account. He says, in the mythological story, Attis was unfaithful to his goddess lover, and in jealous rage, she made him insane. And in that insanity, Attis castrated himself and fled in the forest where he bled to death. Now, does that sound like Jesus? Absolutely not. They don't even relate in any way. So let me give you a few more reasons why we can know with confidence that Jesus is alone a real historical person, and he's not related in any way to these mythological, not historical people like Horus or Osiris. All right, let me give you a few reasons. One, the sources that we have for these mystery religions post-date Christianity. Post-date Christianity. Making the argument that Christianity stole these ideas very difficult or actually impossible to uphold historically. In fact, many authors will conclude it's probably the opposite, as these mystery religions tried to copy Christianity because it actually came written after. Norman Geisler stated this: the first real parallel of a dying and rising God does not appear until 150 AD, more than 100 years after the origin of Christianity. So, if there are any influence of one on the other, it was the influence of the historical event of the New Testament, resurrection, on the mythology, not the reversal. Second thing I want to point out is the events of Jesus' resurrection is based on a historical event and historical person. Now, we'll look at more another day, another video about the historical evidence of the resurrection, but right here I just want to point out that it is a historical event. The stories of Osiris or Horus are not based on historical people, all right? They're not based on historical people, and when you compare what we know about what they say, they don't relate in any way to Jesus. Let me give you one example. Mithra is one that's often brought up, all right? Is this mythological or this mythical character that Jesus is basically a copy of. It's stated that born of a virgin, had 12 disciples, did miracles, died, and was resurrected 3 days later. However, these facts are not facts, all right? There are 3 different versions of Mithra, and they're fragmented. In one version, Mithra came from a rock. Another, he was made as an adult. He did not have 12 disciples, and in no version did he resurrect. So we see when you compare it, actually, they don't correlate at all. Third reason is these new believers, these Christians, the disciples, would never have borrowed from pagan religions. It's important to note that they had Jewish heritage, and they would have been trying to pass Jesus on to their Jewish friends, and Jews absolutely rejected pagan ideas and pagan religion. And you can see this, John McDowell pointing out that Jews intensely resisted pagan ideas. They would never in a million years borrow some pagan idea that they absolutely rejected and wanted nothing to do with to now add into some other belief to try to convince their Jewish friends. It historically makes no sense, and it actually opposes everything they believed and how they lived. Fourth is Jesus' death was unique. All right, it was sacrificial, it was voluntary, it was for sins, it was once historically based, and actually his death ended in victory when he rose again. This is not related or correlates to anything to do with these mystery religions of these gods connected to some sort of seasons that constantly dying and rising. They don't relate in any way. Fifth, the differences far outweigh any similarities. It's often claimed that Osiris is Jesus is a copy of Osiris, that he died and he rose again. But let me give you a picture of what is written or what we can know about it. All right, Seth killed Osiris after he tricked him into entering a casket that sunk into the bottom of the sea. Isis, the sister of the wife of Osiris, discovered the body and revived him by magic. Seth found out and cut him into 14 pieces, scattered his parts widely. Isis found 13 of the 14 pieces, reconstructed Osiris, bringing him back to life. It was really this resurrection. No, Osiris became the god of the underworld. Now, you're like, what? Yeah, those don't relate in any way, and it's not a resurrection. So it's important to see that they do not relate. Finally, parallels prove nothing. In the 1898 book, The Wreck of the Titan by Morgan Robinson, he describes this giant ship that ends up wrecking, and when you're reading, it's a fictional book. When you're reading, you're like, he's describing the Titanic. However, this fictional book was written before the Titanic. Why I point that out? The Titanic is an historical event. And just because there's a fictional book that has similarities does not now discount this historical event. The same with Jesus. Jesus' life, death, and resurrection is historical. If there's any fictional account of something that has similarities in any way, it does not in any way discount the reality of Jesus' historical life, death, and resurrection. So what do we see in conclusion? Jesus' life, death, and resurrection are not in any way a copycat of one of these ancient mystery religions. Christianity is based on the historical event of the life and death of Jesus Christ being crucified and raised again. Jesus does not stand in this long line of these dying and rising gods, but rather he alone stands because he's the only person historically based who lived and died and rose again. Hey, if you found this video useful, helpful, I encourage you like and subscribe, share this on to other people, and I'll see you guys in other videos.